No, America is not losing its global leadership role because of the pandemic. The pandemic has damaged American leadership, but to be fair, it's damaged every major power's influence and reach in the world in different areas. Uh, China obviously is dealing now much more with blame for its inability to contain COVID-19 and its inability to be as open about the causes of COVID-19, as well as the somewhat transactional nature of the aid that it has offered. The European Union does not look as robust today as a better model of global leadership than the United States. The United States still has enormous reserves of power and influence that predated the pandemic and will continue after the pandemic is done, that situates itself at the center of the international system. Our financial base, and as we saw with the development of vaccines, still our technological and scientific base for being able to move things rapidly and get things done. And so what you see is that countries are looking at the United States as a potential partner. They're looking at the United States as a country they wish to partner with in terms of health security, increasingly looking at the role that the United States can play, again, as an engine for global economic growth in terms of helping the world move through, the global economy move through the massive disruptions that the pandemic has caused the global economy. So I think that one of the things as we look at all of this is to acknowledge, yes, the pandemic has caused damage, but not to overestimate the damage done to the United States or to underestimate the costs that the pandemic has taken from other major power centers, including powers that are rivals and competitors to the United States. It can be easy to look at images and reports from other parts of the world and conclude, based upon our own lived experiences in this time, that other countries are recovering, that they're doing much better. It's easy to watch television footage of parties in Wuhan in China and to say they've gotten through the pandemic and obviously they're recovering faster. We have to move beyond kind of the superficial levels of day-to-day life as a metric for recovery to look at fundamentals. And when we look at some of the fundamentals, again, the United States has taken damage, no doubt about it. But the European Union, for instance, is struggling. It is struggling politically. It is struggling economically as it tries to get out of the pandemic. The pandemic has opened up or reopened up some of the existing divisions in the European Union, a point that Amitai Etzioni made in a national interest piece a number of years back, talking about the European Union, said the problem with the EU is that when things are going well, it holds together. When it runs into crises, it puts the Union under stress. When we look at countries like Russia, Iran, and China, more specifically to your question, what the pandemic has done is to reveal the extent to which the economies and politics of these nations are brittle. Doesn't mean that they're going to collapse. It doesn't mean that they're on the verge of falling into chaos or that they will cease to be competitors. But we have seen that in each of these countries, and particularly in Russia and Iran, the pandemic has been accompanied by new surges of political unrest, protests, and the like against existing leaderships. And so there's a sense that they are not necessarily coming out of this with renewed vigor or with a renewed sense of purpose to challenge the United States or to do so from a position of confidence. All of the major revisionist powers, or what we would term as revisionist powers, powers that seek to change the post-Cold War state of affairs, are coming out of the pandemic, but they're coming out cautiously. It's easy from our perspective to assume that we can cherry pick data and say that other parts of the world are looking better compared to our own experience. On the other hand, the pandemic, I think, is producing in all major nations of the world a sense of reassessment, a sense of focusing on domestic needs, building back better, if I can crib the slogan from the Biden-Harris campaign. That sentiment is echoed in other parts of the world. So again, we shouldn't necessarily automatically assume that other countries are poised to rapidly move in and exploit America's period of recovery from the pandemic, because they're doing the same thing as well. The United States really has three areas where it has built-in advantages which can be used not only to better cement ties with other countries, but rebuild a domestic base for American involvement in the world. And the first of these, not surprisingly, coming out of the pandemic, is the question of health security, of reorienting supply lines, supply chains, developing partnerships, whether in pharmaceuticals or in the production of medical equipment, that would partially decouple from China and couple the United States with friends and partners in a way that it is not just simply a security relationship in the military sense, but also about health security. And then, of course, having the spillover effect of stimulating the economy and moving forward on jobs. So a health security partnership, a health security alliance is a way that we have this window to move forward. The energy and climate questions also create some windows of opportunity. There's a sense based upon things such as the weather that we've seen, the understanding that shifts in the climate do create more conducive breeding grounds for disease, and that you need to not only secure health in terms of partnerships which can develop the drugs that we're going to need, the medical equipment that we're going to need, but then also looking at how do we work together to deal with the shifts of climate in terms of infrastructure, hardening infrastructure. How do we look at moving forward on new sources of energy if we're going to be in this transition period as we start moving from hydrocarbons towards newer forms of energy for powering our cities and our industries and our transportation systems. You have, again, some real opportunities to forge partnerships between the United States and like-minded states that can produce these benefits. It's been nearly 20 years since a former National Security Advisor, Robert McFarlane, wrote in the National Interest about the country that, as he put it, breaks the liquid fuel barrier, that comes up with the replacement for how we power our vehicles. The country that is the first adopter of that technology, Bud McFarlane said, would have an immense geopolitical and geoeconomic advantage in the 21st century. So this is one of those areas where the United States can offer that to friends and partners, not only for national security, but again, coming back to the theme that we saw in the interim national security guidance that the Biden administration has released about foreign policy serving the interests of the working families of America, the middle class, the economy. There's a lot of potential for economic stimulus that comes out of those areas. And finally, the window is open here because it's a way for the United States to partner with countries without it having to be adversarial. In other words, you have countries in Europe and in Asia that may have concerns about Russia and China, but don't necessarily want to move into a completely adversarial role vis-a-vis Moscow or Beijing. And earlier in what we saw, say, 4 years ago with the pivot to the Pacific and the concerns about Russia was it almost seemed that the United States was creating zero-sum situations where it was you're with us or you'll have to or you'll be aligned with Moscow or Beijing. If you focus on things like health security, economic security, climate and energy security, there's an understated element of competition with China in particular and with some of the other revisionist powers, but it's framed in such a way that the political establishments and frankly the populations are more inclined to see that as a positive. And finally, again, generating hopefully the types of economic benefits both in the United States and in partner countries, which will provide more of a rationale for the security partnerships that we have. So we have this window, again, while Russia, while China, while Iran, while other countries are a bit more inward looking, the United States can seize the moment, as we already have with some of the partnerships that help to develop some of the COVID-19 vaccines. If we build on that effort, if we build on that foundation, we can provide a basis for regenerating American leadership in the global system.